Hi everybody, I'm Peter Laws and this is the Flicks the Church Forgot. Welcome back to part 3 in my little roundup of some recent horror releases. Now first up we're going to look at a movie called Goodnight Mummy. Now every now and again a horror movie gets an internet buzz of being a particularly frightening film. It happened with films like It Follows and The Babadook, and it's happening currently with the film The Witch. And in a similar way I've seen Goodnight Mummy mentioned in lots of different circles, forums, reviews as being a film of rare power. Just comes out in the UK in time for Mother's Day. How thoughtful. It's a German subtitled movie about two twin brothers who are coping with their mum, who's come home after some sort of accident that she's been in. She's covered in bandages, and through the stress of her recent operation she is depressed and I guess not quite herself, understandably maybe. But the boys start thinking that maybe she's acting differently because she really is somebody else. That she's some sort of imposter that's taken the real mother away. So like good kids, they want to find the real mum and ideally stop the fake one. It's a brilliantly simple setup for a tense drama which plays out like in a very thoughtful and slow way. Don't be expecting some Hollywood style plot twisting shenanigans. This is a sort of lingering movie that slowly builds up the tension. There are twists and turns, but the tension doesn't snap along in that sense. It builds slowly, but when the tension comes it really does lay it on thick. Now watching the film reminded me of another film called Martyrs, and the violence of that film was incredibly extreme and controversial, but it really did turn out to be an important element of the story itself. Goodnight Mummy, I wouldn't say isn't as consistently intense. It's certainly not as visceral, but it does have its moments. In some ways I'd describe Goodnight Mummy as a combination of Martyrs and Misery, but it lacks the warm heart of Misery and the cosmic significance of the story of Martyrs. That's not to say it's not a good film, it is, and I think if you check this out you're going to get a decent dose of creepy atmosphere, thoughtful storytelling and great cinematography. But the film didn't quite live up to the hype I've heard, but it was disturbing. But by the close I was left thinking that it was a very competent thriller, but not one that had broken through the mold of horror. Now the next film up is Deathgasm. You know, you've always wanted to see a demonic zombie having its jaw smashed off with a huge dildo. Well, in slow motion as well. Guess what? Welcome to Deathgasm, which is going to give you that chance. It's a manic horror from New Zealand where metal fan and social outcast Brody forms a band in his garage only to stumble across the chord progression that unlocks hell itself. Now, horror fans will know full well that this isn't the first time the supposed link between horror and heavy metal has been played out on the big screen. Fans of Trick or Treat, I had the soundtrack to that on audio cassette, and Black Roses, I had the soundtrack to that on vinyl. Fans of those films know that this isn't the first time horror has taken conservative culture's fear of metal to its logical conclusion, i.e. that it will unleash a bevy of demons. But Deathgasm is by far the most blood-soaked of them all. The influence of Peter Jackson's early horrors like Brain Dead and Bad Taste are all over this film. The latter even gets specifically screen reference, but there's plenty of energy here to make Deathgasm its own beast. The script's sharp, it's laugh-out-loud funny at times. It was also interesting to see how the supermarket chain Walmart reacted to this. They changed the dirty sounding name of Deathgasm to Heavy Metal Apocalypse. But even more weird is they replaced the dangerous pentagrams on the cover with something far less threatening: guns. Some interesting psychology going on there. Now out from Odeon Entertainment is a fun 50s sci-fi film which has got a one-of-a-kind premise. When a meteor crashes into the desert, it leaves odd black fragments scattered by a nearby town. Is this evidence of an invasion? Are aliens going to break out of the cracking meteor and claim the land? No, not really, but everyone still might die. That's what's so nifty, I think, about this late 1950s sci-fi thriller, that there's no malevolent aliens, there's no blubbering men in rubber suits. The disaster here is purely geological. When the meteor fragments come into contact with water, they grow to skyscraper size and naturally start falling and crumbling. What's more, there's a rainstorm coming. So you get shots of huge crystallized rock toppling and crumbling into rivers, and then obviously growing again and then falling, growing again and falling closer and closer to the town. And what makes things even more tricky for the populace here is that anybody who comes into contact with this weird stuff gets turned into stone themselves. I'd never seen this film before, but I really got a kick out of it. It's a refreshing entry into the science might kill us, but let's use science to save us genre. The Monolith Monsters, do check it out. Monster on the Campus. This one is hokey, but in a really good way. A college professor studies a recently discovered prehistoric fish, but when he accidentally cuts his hand, he gets ancient fish juice into the bloodstream. So naturally, he quickly regresses into a brutish, barely evolved ape. There's lots of pontificating on the nature of life, as well as the hairy beast stomping around towards young ladies who are screaming into their forearms. I also loved how the professor retains at least some civility. Even when he's like a marauding monster, he still remembers to tuck his checked shirt in. What a fella. There's a giant insect in it too, which is always a nice bonus. There's also an interesting but frankly ridiculous angle on the whodunit in this. Basically everybody is trying to work out who keeps knocking the professor out and killing people that he's with. And the police assume, well, obviously it's somebody who has something in for him. It can't possibly be the most obvious choice that it's the professor himself killing these people. For a while, the professor thinks there is someone out there to get him too. But then gradually the realization starts to dawn on him that maybe the baddie out there is actually the beast inside of him, which leaves him with a challenging ethical dilemma. Now there's a sermon. What's he going to do about his ape self? Next up, it's Budo, The Art of Killing. Now, it's a shame karate nut Elvis Presley died in 1977, because if he'd hung around for 2 years, he'd have found his absolute favourite documentary. Budo, The Art of Killing is a slow-motion meditation on Japanese martial arts, meaning it's a lot of shots of topless blokes standing still in the snow before slamming their hands against tree trunks. And boy, do they do it hard. I winced so much in this, I gave myself stomach cramps. Now, I appreciate that this isn't exactly a horror movie, but I'm guessing when someone is slamming the side of their rock-solid hand down on your tender throat, it feels pretty horrific. Plus, The Art of Killing is clearly pushing the exploitation button with that title. At times the film's beautiful, at others it's really campy, but mostly it's a fascinating portrait of the Japanese who managed to even make beating the living crap out of someone an operatic experience. Well, everybody, that's it for this look at some horror movies and other films that have been out recently. For more episodes, including my more in-depth reviews, you can check out the website at theflicksthatchurchforgot.com. You can also find that on Facebook as well. And don't forget to share and subscribe as well. Follow me on Twitter at Rev Peter Laws, or read my column, my magazine column in the Fortune Times print magazine. But until then, don't forget the flicks the church forgot.